Did you know that sometimes when you squeak, it might actually be a good sign? My name is Josh Gu, and after years of studying the clarinet with some of the best teachers from around the world, I am excited to be sharing my knowledge with you. So go to QuickStartClarinet.com or check the description on this video to see all of the wonderful resources I have to help you reach your clarinet dreams. And of course, subscribe to this channel for weekly clarinet and music tips and tricks. This may sound completely counterintuitive, but it is actually a good sign when you squeak. Sometimes, depending on the squeak, there's caveats to it, but what it can be a good sign of is that your voicing is actually in a good place. The voicing is how we aim for the notes on the instrument between the embouchure pressure, the tongue position, the air speed and pressure, and all of that stuff. It helps us to aim at a specific partial that we're going for. The clarinet's kind of interesting and I think kind of unique in instruments because the voicing of the clarinet is very high. For all of the notes, you should be aiming quite high. I've seen diagrams before of like, if this is sort of your aperture or like the bullseye window, the clarinet aims really close to the top here. You can kind of think about this being inside of your mouth or where the air is hitting instead of hitting in the middle, which is kind of a slow, slightly down air. The clarinet is and has that very high, very fast air in that bullseye. So, if you're not playing with that, then you have the standard voicing issues where as you go up into the high notes, you start to get grunts, you start to get undertones, and you just can't get the high notes to come out really well. And maybe sometimes it only shows up on your articulation, but every time you get those thuddy high notes when you're articulating, it's probably a voicing issue and probably that you're not aiming in the right spot. So what does this have to do with squeaking? Squeaking is often a voicing issue, but not in the way that you're thinking. You can squeak by playing a low note and then just changing the voicing and playing the higher partials, but those are actually good squeaks. Yes, it's still not the partial that you were necessarily aiming for when that happens, but it means that your voicing's in a good spot to hit those higher partials and you know where those higher partials are, and that will be very important for playing high notes. Just real quick to break down what I mean by partials, if you aren't familiar with that. All instruments work based off of a harmonic series. The easiest one to think of is like a violin or a guitar, where when you have no fingers down and you bow the string or strum the string, it vibrates the whole string at a certain frequency. If you press right in the middle of that, so like the 12th fret of the guitar, and bow or strum, then it's half of the string vibrating, so it's shorter, and it vibrates at twice the frequency, which gives you an octave higher. So that's the second partial of that string's vibration. Woodwind instruments work similarly. Clarinets also kind of similarly, but even more different. But all instruments have partials, where you have fundamental notes that are sort of the open vibration, and then you have partials above that that are higher harmonics or squeaks on the fundamental. That's what the register key does on the clarinet, is it gets you from the low fundamental register into the next register, which is the clarion register is the name of it on the clarinet. And then typically we sort of take that first finger off for most of the fingerings up into the altissimo, which is the third register of the clarinet. I won't get into how clarinet's weird and the registers are a 12th rather than an octave, but clarinet's just weird like that. When you're squeaking, what's happening is you're hitting one of those higher partials by accident. Now, there's a very specific case where squeaking is actually a really good sign, and I encourage my students to not be afraid of squeaking for a few reasons. But the case where it's a good sign to squeak is when it's a finger issue. And I think a majority of squeaks are a finger issue. Either literally a hole not being covered, a side key being bumped to cause a leak, or just not quite precise coordination where, like, say you're playing from open G to C, if you're maybe a little bit slow on that first finger on your left hand coming down and leave that hole open, then you're effectively sort of fingering a high E, and it can be very easy to squeak that high E out, and then it won't want to come back to the C even when you put that finger down, just because it likes to stay up in the higher register once the higher register is going. So that is a great sign that your voicing is in good shape. If you're going from G to C and are accidentally a little slow with this first finger and the E immediately pops out, then that means that you're having the voicing and the support that you need to get that high E to come out easily. And every time that you're struggling to get your altissimo notes out and your high notes to come out, just remember you've probably squeaked those notes out before, and they've probably come out easily when you've just missed with the fingers a little bit. So lean into that squeaking a little bit. Don't be afraid of squeaking, and know that every time you squeak, maybe not every time, but most of the times that you squeak, especially if you know that there was a finger issue, it's actually a good sign that the voicing and the support is in the right way. And this is why I really encourage my students and you to not be afraid of squeaking, because that's actually the biggest problem, is that you squeak and then you're afraid of it. You maybe just missed the coordination of your fingers a little bit, and you think to yourself, oh, I squeaked on that note, there's something wrong with that note, I need to be afraid of that note now. And once you start playing afraid, your air support goes away, your embouchure maybe gets too tight or too loose, and you're not confidently aiming and confidently supporting that note. So the sound's going to be worse, you're going to get more undertones on that note, it's going to be harder to get that note out in general. So the moral of the story is, don't be afraid of squeaking. Squeaking can actually be a good sign if it's a finger problem. It's a great sign that your voicing is in good shape, so we can learn to appreciate our squeaks a little bit and not worry about them so much or be afraid of them, because that's the last thing that you want to do, is be afraid of it. So hopefully this was helpful. Let me know if you have any questions. If you like the video, hit the like. If you aren't subscribed to the channel, hit the subscribe, hit the bell, get the notifications, all that good stuff. But thank you so much for watching this one, and I look forward to seeing you in another video.